right, we are live. Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you all. I guess we'll get started with approval of the minutes from our last meeting. Did everyone have a chance to look over them and have any changes at all? Okay, we'll go ahead with approval. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
We should probably have a
Yeah,
motion.
you're right. Can we get a motion?
Second.
Doug made a motion, need a second?
Taking care of business.
So we've got a big day today. Did everyone have a chance to look through the funding scenarios? I know there was a lot of information.
And you got a last minute. Okay, we are prepared to walk the team through.
Yes, so, I think everyone except for Anne has gone through this process before in terms of participating in making funding recommendations for our grant process. So what we supplied everyone with yesterday, late afternoon, was a spreadsheet that included all of the data that we downloaded from your evaluations in the grant portal. There are several tabs within this spreadsheet. So I just want to kind of familiarize everyone with what's on each of those tabs so we know what we're looking at. Angela, if you can make your screen bigger, that would be great. A little bit more. Okay, we can kind of see that. We might want to turn a light off. Sure. So on the first tab, we have the scores from top scoring project to lowest scoring project. And that is an average of all of your scores. So we wanted to provide just a really brief snapshot of what that looked like. So you have the organization, their project, the amount requested for that project, and the scores that you all provided. On the second tab, the scenario summary, staff went through and created a few kind of starting places for potential funding scenarios. And we'll walk through each of these in a moment, but we kind of specified narratively what each of those scenarios entails, hopefully to give kind of a helpful overview of what we're looking at. In the scenarios tab, this is where we have all of the data. So the scenarios tab shows each organization the project that they submitted, the focus area associated with the project that they self-selected when they applied, per the strategic partnership grant priority areas or focus areas. That subcategory that we made available in the application process. We also included information about geography in this tab or the sheet, which included whether it was a city of Asheville specific project or service location versus greater Buncombe County.
And I would jump in there to say there were some editorial choices that we made to oversimplify the geography. So if you remember the answers, we thought we were getting really good information about like where will these services be delivered, and we included that, just the report out of their answers to the geography questions on a tab so we can flip over and reference it, but it wasn't simple yeses and nos, and it was more narrative or qualitative information. So for the ease of trying to make quantitative data out of it, we used their zip codes. And I know that the city of Asheville boundaries don't exactly match the zip codes that are associated with the city, like 28804 includes some Woodfin. But for the purpose of this exercise, we chose projects that were only in Asheville associated zip codes and labeled them as Asheville, and projects that also either exclusively or also were in non-Asheville zip codes and labeled them as Buncombe. So it's not an exact match, and we can go in and look at them on a case by case if we're not sure, but just to kind of get a sense of geographic diversity. When we hear from commissioners, they want to see projects reflecting the whole county. That was our kind of shorthand way of trying to.
And just as a snapshot of that, 14 out of the total 78 projects were Buncombe County projects, as we have kind of signed them here.
So I have a question. So a lot of them, not maybe not a lot, but some of them said we're physically located in Asheville, but we serve the entire county. Where did you put those?
We're based on their service location, so where services were being
And they were
delivered.
explicit enough about that. Like, because some of them just said we serve the whole county.
That's right, and we didn't do it based on population served because there wasn't clear, like, quantitative data there. So like, say Helpmate located in Asheville, serves all of them, has been able to give information about who they historically serve. We still flagged it as Asheville, because when we get to the place where we're mapping where our grantees are or where the work is happening, it's Asheville based. So that's why we know it's oversimplifying to believe that the projects that say Asheville are only Asheville, but it gives us just like a snapshot of what's concentrated in Asheville.
Again, it's not perfect. We try each year to get a little bit closer to the data or information that we want from that kind of geography served question. And we're trying to look at that as part of the whole in terms of the funding recommendations this year. We also included information about projects that received funding in FY24, so currently funded. The request amount for each project, if there was an increase in the request, so if the same project has been requested or funded in FY24 and then requested again in FY25, this coming fiscal year, if there was an increase in that request and what that looks like, the scores that you all provided, and then if you'll remember, when you were going through and evaluating each project, there was an option to say, I would like to recommend this project for funding. So we included the percent of committee members who recommended each project for funding, who said, yes, I would like to recommend this. And then that gets us into a few different scenarios, which we'll go to in a second. I did just want to point out there is the tab for geography that includes all those responses. So you can see there what we were looking at when we were trying to synthesize that data. It's a lot of very narrative information that.
What about the places with multiple locations? Did we get all of the addresses in?
Yes, and if there were an example, trying to find one
Yeah, I
that's
saw
got Asheville and
AMCHC is
Buncombe.
near the, you know, it's
If there were,
near the top.
if there were Asheville and Buncombe addresses, we.
You included both, okay, you included Buncombe? CHC, so Leicester is a Buncombe.
Let's take a look.
And Robbinsville.
I mean, they have several outside of Buncombe County altogether, but Leicester.
Yeah, they do with Leicester.
So for the purpose of this exercise, if you can look at row 6,
Mhm.
Angela. This was the oversimplification that we've done. We looked at the service locations listed and the zip codes associated with them, and they've put 01, 28801 and 28806.
Oh,
So we listed Asheville, because they're only listing Asheville addresses. Now, that portion of Lester Highway
is, I think, on county.
may be outside of the city limits, but still in an Asheville zip code. We didn't do a mapping exercise to cross-reference with city of Asheville, but just Asheville zip code. So
Yeah.
this information should not be given the full weight of making funding decisions, but more help us at a glance look and see is there balance in the portfolio.
And again, we can go through, there are specific projects where like, wait, I'm pretty sure that they're serving
Yeah.
areas
Other
of,
locations.
we can go through and look, do a deeper dive there. We also included a tab for information on those increased requests of projects that are currently funded and asked for additional funding this year, at an increased amount. So we have, you'll see in column E is the current FY '24 funded amount versus column F is what they've requested for FY '25. And then column G is the percent increase. We included some increased rationales there. And this is a little bit complicated because a lot of people remember, let's say, Piscataway Eagles is a good example. They requested last year $80,000 for their funding. They received a partial award of $64,000. So they're not actually requesting an increase, but it does show up that way because of the partial award. So that's just that information that we included there in that increased rationale to kind of look back on if you all would like to. And then the data tab is just all of the raw data from all of your responses, which is a lot to look at, so. So let's go back to the scenarios. And I want to walk you through what each of these scenarios, scenario 1 through scenario 4, entail, what we're looking at there before we kind of go through and look at numbers.
Angela, will you bump that so that it takes up the full screen?
Thank you. So the first scenario that we're looking at is the same scenario that we plugged in to use for a funding recommendation last year. So we just transferred that over to what we're looking at for scoring this year. And as a reminder, what the committee decided on last year was to fund projects scoring at 90 to 100%, at 100% of their request, and then fund projects scoring at 87 to 89% at 80% of their requests. And any projects that scored 86% or less received 0% of their request. So if we're looking at that this year, that would allocate $877,739, which is almost all of the $900,000 fund, to 17 projects. The second scenario.
Before you go to the second, can we look at the way scenario 1 looks on the
Breaks
screen and see? If you flip to the scenarios tab and just filter down to that first scenario.
So with this scenario, you would be basically funding projects from YWCA down to Nana Food Bank. Or that looks, oh, sorry. Western North Carolina Community Health Services. Sorry, I was looking at the second scenario. And that would fully fund down to row 11, which is on track financial. And then you're looking at 80% funding from UNITE down to Western North Carolina Community Health Services.
So when we're all done talking about scenarios, we're gonna be asking which one seems to speak to you as a jumping off point. You don't have to adopt any one of these scenarios, even as is. So be thinking about as we look at it. Also keep in mind, I don't think you mentioned this yet, we are asking for more funding in the strategic partnership grants. So once we get our $900,000 scenario locked in, we'll come and have a second conversation about if we were to get an additional 100,000, how would it be used? It doesn't feel like a certainty that it's gonna happen, so having two scenarios seems like the way to go.
And as a reminder, in this first scenario, that would be 17 projects funded. For FY24, we funded 23 projects, is that right, Angela? Which this seems to kind of be the trend. The year before that, FY23, I believe we funded 30-something projects. Is that right?
37.
37 projects. So
The big jump that year was full funding. The committee spent a lot of time talking about trying to honor the full amount of projects requested to the extent possible. So we did over 100% funding last year, and the asks are just bigger, which is why when we do 100%, when we apply the exact same rule, we didn't get as far as next.
Well, I think as you said earlier, it seemed like a lot of the requests, because we set the maximum at 80, or a heck of a lot of $80,000 requests, and quite a few, 50,000 in the range of 50,000, whereas in previous years, I think we had more lower asks, so that might be a reason why we're funding fewer projects.
Yeah, one of those unintended consequences, I guess, about putting a number out there. As a cap, a committed cap.
And as a note for that first scenario, there would still be some money left. So it would be $22,261 remaining. That could potentially partially fund another project. And again, this is just a jumping off point. So if this is a scenario that you all are interested in looking into further again this year, you could look at a different breakdown of potential partial funding.
Also, welcome, Kim. We weren't sure if you would be with us. Glad you're here.
So, any other questions on that first scenario before we look at the rest? Great. So the second scenario takes us to creating a little bit more balance within the fund by focus area. So this is something that has definitely been part of the conversation each year with the committee at this point. And like, how are we balancing across the focus areas? What projects are funded, how much of each focus area is funded? So this is a little bit of a new take on that, new idea. And what we're looking at here in this scenario is funding the top 3 scoring projects, highest scoring projects for each focus area, starting there. And again, those are well-being, education, vibrant economy, and environment. And then moving to the next highest scoring projects overall. So not necessarily in a focus area after those top 3 for each. So it would be 12 of those projects funded by, or looking at the focus areas, and then remaining funds going to just the next highest scoring projects overall. So if we're looking at that in the spreadsheet, that is going to give us, again, 17 projects funded.
This is where the beautiful color coding comes in. I'm sorry, Kathy has left the room.
Yeah. So the color coding, blue is for educated, capable community. The purple, pinky purple is resident well-being. That like peachy orange color is vibrant economy. And then environmental stewardship is green. So you can see in this scenario what those top three for each focus area are. And then the additional non-color coded cells, I think there are 5, is that right? Yeah. That have numbers in them, those are the next highest scoring projects that would allow us to fully fund those projects. Again, we would have some money left on the table, 61,897. So that wouldn't fully fund the next highest scoring project, but yeah, pretty close.
Angela, we uncheck the filter so we can see what projects would be skipped over in this scenario. So what this ends up doing is funding the top 13 projects, and then there's a gap, and it starts scooping projects that have slightly lower scores because they're from the focus areas that weren't as prominent in the overall pool. We had very few, I think we said there were 4 environment-focused applications, and economy was also lower, maybe 10 or 11. So it does jump down, but the lowest scoring project still is in that 85% range. So these are still all high scoring projects overall. It keeps us funding in the top half of the list, at least.
And no less than 88% of the committee recommended each of those projects for funding.
Do we have duplicate organizations in these areas?
Good question. I believe
I can
Yes,
quickly look and
illegal.
get that
It's
answer.
illegal.
is the only one that
That's
would be
illegal.
a duplicate there,
In scenario
1 and 2.
1 and 2.
Oh, and maybe ABCCM, is that another?
I can look through and get that answer, unless there are continues.
Yeah, so that is, again, another thing that this committee has talked about each year is those organizations that are requesting multiple projects be funded. And again, like, I know Pisco Legal is requesting the maximum amount for both of those projects. And I think that was the reason, one of the rationales for partial funding over the last year, but something to be cognizant of.
Yeah.
Any other questions on scenario 2?
I have confirmed that ABCC and Fiscal Legal both have 2 proposals that make it in scenario 1 and 2. I'll check 3 and 4 as well.
I believe ABCCM, one of those projects, they're a fiscal sponsor, I think, for the free dental clinic.
They may have a dental partner, I don't know, I can't remember.
Yeah, I think that's right. We can double check that though. So the third scenario, again, we're just kind of layering on with each of these. So the third scenario, again, is funding, looking at funding the 3 top scoring projects for each focus area. So that's kind of our launching point. But then we're also building in that geography portion. So after those 12 top scoring for each focus area, we're then looking at funding the top 5 scoring projects for each geographic category at 100% if they're not already included in the focus area funding. And then I believe we would be looking at So that would give us, again, our 12 by focus area, and then we would have an additional 5 projects that would be going to those organizations that are, have service locations in Buncombe County, not just Asheville. So that gives us a little bit of a different spread, because again, we're not just going by the next highest scoring necessarily. It does give us, so there are, let's see, I'm sorry, there were 3 that would be Buncombe County on top of the 12 by focus area. And then there are 2 projects, ABCCM and Pisco Legal, that would be the next highest scoring just overall, that would be included in that scenario.
And again, you're listening for, did any of these scenarios speak to you as a jumping off point? If there were tweaks that you wanted to make to the rationale, or like line item things in or out.
And I checked real quick, and ABCCM and ABCCM Doctors Medical Clinic have different tax ID numbers, so they are 2 different entities.
Thanks, Evelyn. So again, we're looking at 17 projects funded in this scenario. There's a pattern here. And again, we would have a little bit of money left over to play around with. That would be almost $31,000 left. We have one more scenario, and that is scenario 4. So this is looking at focus area, geography, and project size. So what Liz was talking about earlier, a lot of these organizations are asking for kind of the maximum amount that we have allowed, that 80,000 or close to that. But in looking at all of the requests, there are several organizations or projects that are requesting smaller amounts for their projects. And that has been something that I know this committee has discussed many times. How do we balance the fund with that information? So scenario 4, again, looking at the top 3 scoring projects by focus area. And then we're looking at the top 5 scoring projects for geography. Then we would be looking at the top 4 scoring projects requesting 25,000 or less. And those are all fully funded projects. And then with any left over, that would go to the next highest scoring projects. So we look at that in the spreadsheet. We would be looking at additional funds going to Jewish Family Services, Leaf Global Arts, and then you would go again to the ABCCM Doctors Medical Clinic. So,
Can you see who doesn't get funded in these? Or is it just, it's all the same sort of funded?
basically the same except for,
Yeah,
and that one is
remove that
illegal,
filter, please.
wouldn't get.
Wouldn't get it.
And instead you'd be funding the 2 smaller requests.
So which of the small, I'm getting so confused with all the different colors. So the ones that are just in light pink. So in the last column, can you help me find the ones that are added that weren't before? I'm not sure what the light pink ones
Yeah.
are.
Just the font is light pink, not the
No,
sound.
but they're not, okay,
So that
they're
is,
not colored in, they're the ones that are added in each scenario.
those
We're waiting for
are,
your screen to refresh.
so for example, Western North Carolina Community Health Services is one of those. That is one that was that additional layer of geography served, building in, that's a Buncombe County service location.
Gotcha, so these are ones that don't, I mean, they still are in one of the priorities areas that weren't selected based on that, but they were selected you know, there are 3 that came in because we geography of period 4. That carries over to 4.
We've lost sound online.
And whenever there was a remainder, it was just us getting an application that was bigger than that and stopping. So it could have room for some more smaller asks.
So it looks like Helpmate doesn't get funded in scenario 3 and 4, is that correct?
Let's take a look. So it's a high scoring project that is in resident well-being, which already has 4 higher scoring resident well-beings.
So it's correct, it wouldn't get, if
Correct.
it only gets scored or funding in 1 or 2.
You can see the kind of theory of what we are after here.
Right.
And we could tweak this, any one of these in different ways. Like if we wanted to say, instead of the first 3 from each focus area, what would it look like if we did the first 4 or 5 from each focus area? Or what if we did geography, or what if we did focus area and size, but not geography because it doesn't feel like it's super reliable data measure. We can turn on or off these different, or try our different levers, maybe that's a good analogy. Because what you're pointing out is an example of again, one of those like unintended weird consequences that happens where it is our 7th highest scoring project that doesn't make half of the scenarios we put forward. Because anytime we're making room for something else to come in, we're taking things out.
And it does seem like geography is not a reliable indicator. You know, if you're looking at geography and the top 1 or 2 projects got 60%, score, then something about that doesn't seem right.
And if we bring out a portfolio that doesn't have any environmental projects in it, or any projects that aren't located in Asheville,
Yeah.
it may feel inadequate to our
Yeah.
commissioners.
Right. Yes. Yes, I get those nuances.
And again,
And it's all valid.
these are options as kind of starting places to help aid in the discussion since it's so much information. So given these 4 scenarios, are there any that you all are like, I very much want to start here, like this feels like a good starting place, or any that you want to say like, let's just take off the table, not even start?
I don't know how quickly or easily it can be filtered, but I would like to see it filtered with just the focus areas and, what's the other one?
Size.
And size. To me, I agree with geography, and I think it even goes deeper than that. Geography is multifaceted when you talk about it because Buncombe County is so diverse. It's a tough one.
Angela, will you flip to the summary while he's speaking?
I'm theorizing, but you're gonna have geographical areas of Buncombe County that just by the nature of their location and culture, they're not gonna have as many applicants in the county. And other geographical areas are gonna have overwhelmingly more applicants. Yes.
So Mark, my question is, let's look at scenario 2's description and see, would that way of adding focus area make sense? It was making sure that the top 3 from each of the 4 focus areas are included. And then based on scoring, plugging their dollar amount in. Higher scoring is a larger percent of their request. next higher scoring, next highest percentage of the request.
For the focus area, and then also include traffic size.
Yep.
Something.
So don't tweak the rationale, just pull out geography.
But not for scenario three, I think maybe it's scenario four.
So I think, Angelin, what we're asking for is the first part of is scenario 2 with part of scenario 4 blended in. Do you have any questions before you start trying to do my spreadsheet magic?
One other thing with geography, if we could even have a column eventually, not today, commissioner zone, like assigned, and see how many they're all like,
Yes.
what's that called? It's not zone, district,
District, which
like
is
District 1 and
troublesome because they keep changing the district.
right.
Maybe.
As of today, right.
Maybe the question should be Asheville City versus Buncombe County. So we can, because I bet you some of these organizations could even provide like percentages from the people that they serve, especially these larger organizations that probably keep collecting that data.
I think we should consider trying again each year. So
Yeah.
far, we've been tweaking the geography questions to maybe like less narrative and like check this box if you, check this box if you,
That's
so that we can filter based on, serve people from all over. Okay, turn those ones on. Are located in Buncombe outside of Asheville, turn that.
Yeah.
Or located in a specific district, what district?
We even, with our site visits last year, I learned that it's going for all of West North Carolina. And you were free to share that information, like. But, so they're spreading, even though they may not put it in their geography paragraph, it is being used.
Yeah, and we tried putting the like population served answers in there, but then it started taking us in a lot of different directions beyond only where the people live. And it felt like
Is that,
distracting for
yeah,
this
how big of a
exercise.
problem is serving outside Buncombe County?
They need to spend the money.
Yeah, right.
Sorry, yeah.
They have to be physically located in Buncombe County, like their address, and then they need to be served.
Isn't one of the questions, which district, which zone or district which commissioner's district you're in?
Can't remember if we asked that.
You used to ask that.
Yes, we used to.
Don't think
We also used to appoint our committee members by that, and then people would move or then they would redistrict because the state, I think it follows state house lines, the county commission districts. Angela, do you have any questions about building scenario 5?
Yes, so how many of the lower scoring do you want to, like, do you want to do the top 5 of the lower amounts, or how many do you want to include?
Do you want to start with top 5 and see what it looks like?
Sure. And then the same logic that 90 and above at 100% or 85 to 89 at 80%?
100%, 80%? Let's try it.
Okay.
So here's the rationale for what she's building. Top 3 scoring projects from each focus area. And top 5 scoring applications at $25,000 or less. Put them all in the funding scenario and allocate their funding amount based on their score. If they scored a 90 or higher, put it in 100% of their request. If they scored under 90, put it in 80%. I have wondered if we may, and want to think about more than top 3, maybe top 4. or even this starts getting more nuanced, because we don't have the same amount of applications in the project. Maybe we're saying the top 5 or 6 out of resident well-being, because we had so many there, and the top 3 out of.
Yeah.
That we can keep tweaking. I'm capturing the rule, Angeline. I think. So you don't have to worry about that.
So it looks
And are we
like,
You're muted, we can't hear you.
That would result in 20 projects and you would have 176,817 left over. And
So we need to go further. Go ahead.
I've got it filtered down so that, oh, hold on, there's a problem here.
Oh yeah, maybe there's not as much money left over as we got.
And I don't know why I pulled that one. Hold on just a second, let me fix it.
Are we looking at total amount funded by category 2? Because some of the resident well-being ones at the top are actually not big numbers. You know what I mean? Like you would hate to like, sorry.
No, but we can't.
You know what I'm
Instead of
saying?
take
Like,
that into consideration.
yeah, because like you might be cutting out a lot of money out of resident well-being just because those are smaller. I mean, I haven't done that, but I'm just looking at it.
Let us know when you feel ready for us to look at this scenario.
Yeah. It's good. It's 10,843 left over at this point with 20 projects funded. And I have it filtered down so that the ones that you're seeing are the ones that are funded for that scenario.
Carolina's gonna restart us again. We keep
Sorry.
losing your screen.
This happens.
applications requesting $25,000 or less.
Will you please show it unfiltered, Angela, so we can see what gets skipped over?
And maybe enlarge it.
Can we make the screen a little bigger, Angela?
Possibly if we hide O and P for now.
Thank you. Oh, yeah.
So it gets us down to, there's the, stop scrolling where we see that first gap of what gets skipped over. It gets us the first 14, where it skips over.
And what is the score? Can you show the scores? Yeah. Maybe minimize the project titles. Yeah.
Tell me when you're ready for me to scroll down so you can see more.
How many does this scenario fund?
20.
Keep going. So the new ones that are getting added in here, Bounty and Soul, Irene Wortham, Our Voice, Riverlink.
YMCA.
I'll stop doing it, that's hurting my eyes.
Is that the bottom there, Angela, YMCA?
With this methodology, if we add $100,000, what would we do?
We're not there yet.
Okay. See what I'm saying? Like we just need to think about what that information would be.
I have found that the budget climate is very competitive this year. There's a possibility we may end up with something between 1 and 100,000 extra. So I want us to make sure we feel really good about the base and then have the ability to have maybe some priorities that we would revisit if there was more money.
Another thing that might be of interest to consider is there a cutoff in terms of a scoring percentage? Where you just wanna look at like this score and above? Because that last one in this scenario getting funded is YMCA, and that's just under 85%.
What was the lowest percentage?
46.5 or something.
Yeah,
Overall?
46.67.
Yeah, pickleball.
What was the average?
And that that's a geography thing, printed in the lower. It is brought in above others because of the,
It's not from, this doesn't look at geography, not the scenario, it's
This one, yeah.
application size.
exactly.
And we're at YMCA, that's at about halfway, you know.
The average score was 82.48%. The median score, the very middle, was 83.75. Is it below or above the median? So that could be a cutoff, the midline.
I'd like to see, I understand the full funding, but I think all these organizations that got really above 90 have resources that they can use. What about if we funded the top 90% at 85% and then everybody else at 80%, see how many organizations we get in? I mean, I think we got over 20, we're doing pretty well.
Do you want to try this as a scenario 6,
That's
Angela?
not too complicated.
We, AKA Angeline, can do it. And I think that we would say that applies on both, whether they're getting picked for focus area or application size.
Yeah, I think it might just get a lot of everything.
I think that our, another one of our committees going through this process was looking at this week was taking the requested amount for each project and multiplying that by their score. So, for example, YWCA requested 30,000, they scored 95.19, and then seeing what that amount is.
So nobody gets the full amount. I think that's interesting.
Rather than bands, it would
That's
be
an
an exact.
interesting scenario.
We have room for a 7th scenario.
I'm not seeing that.
Can I just ask, before we move on to 7 scenarios, are there any scenarios here that y'all are like, don't even wanna look at that? We can just roll that out. Or do
Well, I
want to
think
do
there's a
everything?
reason we're not talking about scenario 1 because it's really limiting the scope of what we're funding. So I agree that we need to look at geography and the size of the grant as well. I think that's important.
We dropped geography from
So well, or the
the area, focus area.
yeah, focus area. But I think geography, we have to consider, like, I mean, are we gonna present and say everything's from Nashville?
Let's see what the scenario yields. Like, why don't we get a scenario we like and pause and then say, like, okay, what's in it?
Yeah,
If we just add geography to every scenario, but kind of ignore it but just see how it plays out.
Have the information.
Yeah, just have the information. We may get a scenario we like that works geography wise.
When you did the map last year, we don't do, this time we don't have that data, or do we?
We do, it was their service locations.
Oh, okay,
So we
this
said,
is-
give us the address of everywhere you deliver services. So that when we looked at, it has 3 addresses,
Uh-huh.
and we put a dot on the map for any service location. So it made a nice representation of
Uh-huh.
the reach.
Yeah.
I don't think you're gonna find many organizations here that don't serve people outside of Buncombe County. I think they're all, maybe Steve Bottom, I bet you people out in Madison County know about it.
But they're not supposed to use our funds for those, and many of them don't, I mean, many of them have other sources of funding.
Right.
Outside Buncombe County.
So geography relates to, are we saying geography is about zone they're in, zone that their service area is in, or zone that their office is in?
That's the problem.
We looked at service locations where they are gonna deliver this program
Right,
or project.
that's
But
geography.
there's a lot of ways to look at geography.
Yeah.
But it,
We also asked them about,
there's no way to
who
look
do you
at
serve?
clients.
It's hard to tell the difference between people.
We asked.
There probably is a way.
It's all we can talk
We don't have it yet.
But we don't ask them yet.
Yeah.
I mean, you know why, from YWCA, the people, the mothers love, I bet they have people coming from Henry County.
Right.
I mean, it's just almost impossible.
It does feel almost impossible.
I think, I totally agree.
And to tell the quality, or tell the difference between a group that just says we're open to anyone, but in practicality doesn't really serve everyone, versus a group that really is like doing a lot of outreach and recruitment engagement and has diverse client base.
Can you remind me, Angela, what we're looking at with scenario 6?
Yep, so scenario 6 is basically scenario 5, which is looking at the top 3 projects for each focus area, and if their score is 90 or above, allocating 85% to them, and then the 85 to 89 gets 80%, and then also the top 5 projects under 25,000 with that same logic. So that funds 20, but then you do have 85,489 left to allocate to other projects.
Okay, so can we see scenario 6, the locations of those projects? I guess maybe we need to filter it down.
Yeah.
We all have these computers that automatically save now, but I still have the feeling, like, have you saved recently?
So the ones that are showing now are City of Asheville. So there's the majority of them. 17 of them are City of Asheville, so 3 would be Buncombe.
Yeah, it may be something that we take as homework, because we have 2 meetings this month.
Yeah.
To look at if and when we get to like a leading scenario, to go home and check it and see how reflective is it. We have still about half an hour.
So those scenarios are being saved and then sent to us.
And then, yeah, one more, I think.
Yeah, do you want to try a scenario 7 where, Anne, you were suggesting, what would it be like to see the percent of funding that they're given matching their score?
Percent they're being asked, percent they're asked for, multiplied times, you were talking about that one, times their score.
Yeah.
And see how that works.
And still layer that onto the focus area and project size filters.
Yes.
Did you capture that, Angela?
Okay, so the request amount times the score, but still have just the focus area right?
And application size. So building on 5 and 6,
Okay, so, okay. Got it.
but it adjusts their recommended amounts, which should give us, I don't know if that will give us more or less.
Yeah, I just thought it was an interesting approach from this other committee.
Mhm.
But
It puts you over by $11,208 with 20 funded.
Right, so very close. Teasing it up.
What does geography look like with that one?
What was that?
I think that would probably look the same as.
It would be the same, the 3 county, it's funding the same projects, just at different amounts.
What are the 3 that are outside Asheville in that scenario?
Bounty and so Asheville Greenworks and the YMCA.
So 2 of those are environment.
Is YMCA, oh, they've got services that are occurring in Candler and Black Mountain.
So looking at kind of different variations. Is there anything that's really jumping out to you all as like?
Personally, I feel like I need time to look at this on the bigger
Yeah.
screen and digest it, and then I can say, oh, this would
We can try and synthesize the information a bit more to include that when we send out the updated spreadsheet of like what each scenario is yielding. Because I know it's just been a lot of plug and play right now without time to kind of see it or process it.
Seems like no matter how you finagle it, about 20 projects is what we're gonna end up with in our present. I mean, that's the maximum that we come up with.
Did you send us a document last year that had all the funding from the start of this for like 4 years or 3 years?
Yes.
Can we see maybe that to see like, maybe these top 10 they're still the same top 10. And, because they are as beloved to our hearts, but they're like in their 5th or 6th year of getting things.
Yeah, and we want to talk again after this grant cycle about whether or not the group's interested in adjusting the eligibility criteria, because it is hard to implement. Sometimes it's hard to tell when it's the same project or a different project, because it can be nuanced. We can send you the funding history.
Yeah, it would be interesting to hear from you all at the next meeting too, as you have more time to look at this in detail. Looking at the projects that were funded in FY '24 as well. How many of these organizations are we continuing to fund year over year versus potentially new projects or new organizations?
are any of these year 3 funded? They get it for free, right? They can apply.
They can have up to 3 for the same project.
So
So yes, we can,
if we see that, like if this is like their 3rd year, where we are in their requests. And when asking for one submission per tax ID, does that like throw a whole different wrench in it, I guess, because she said like ABCCM or that was 2 different tax IDs?
there's not a limit on being able to submit multiple applications at this time. The committee could A, say, oh, we want to institute that rule for next year, so, because we have too many applications. Or the committee could say, we're gonna only fund the best scoring one. Making recommendations.
Well, you know, and a different tax ID doesn't, I mean, that doesn't really get it either because ABCCM's medical clinic, I mean, they spin them off with different tax IDs.
Yeah.
They're still ABCCM.
So there is an A scenario, I'm not suggesting it's kind of budget is coming up. So we could think about, just for in the future, saying, well, we want a certain percentage of ongoing, a certain percentage of our funds should go to new projects.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of it gives, because I do think, the ones that we fund, they're so, they're just so strong, the ones that we fund year after year. And I know Ray was not here, he's always talking about, we really want to give money to the startups, right? So we could, conceive of, I don't know if we want to be serious, because the drug is crazy, but you could also say, well, we want, to fund, 20% of our funding to go to new initiatives or something.
This scenario, all of these scenarios are a significant evolution from the present last year. And I felt very satisfied with what we went through last year, but I felt like the applications and the applicants were very different last year. This opens up a whole host of thoughts in terms of the scoring process and the application information for next year. But that's next year. But for this year, I'm feeling excited and good about looking at these different scenarios and then coming back next year. The only thing that I don't really see a way to talk about or address is the concern that one organization asks for the highest amount for 2 projects, and that seems to feel all the scenarios.
And it's within this committee's purview to recommend whatever makes sense. And because of the competition in funds, like the committee could say, we're only gonna recommend 1 per organization, regardless of tax ID, or per tax ID to make room for others.
Because it's been said that you seem to have other streams.
And there was a
Different
year,
funding streams.
I'm thinking of the precedent here, Liz, you might help me remember, Doug. We didn't have an advertised cap, but we instituted the $80,000 cap post-application as a way of like trying to deal with flat proposals.
Yeah,
It
we
was
were
like, last year feels like a
$1.5
long time
million
ago.
request.
Well, and if you want, if the goal is to have new projects, maybe even 80,000 is too high. You know what I'm saying? Because,
Our goal is to be everything.
And that is something to Mark's point, we will have a meeting, I think we take the month of June off, or May maybe, to just let everybody breathe for a moment. But when we do reconvene after we've made the funding recommendations and provided those to commissioners, we will talk about potential process improvements for next year in the application and all of that, so that we're capturing that information for when we come back together the next cycle.
That's not next week, is it? It's the 16th.
Yeah, we still have, another regular meeting not next week, I think on the 18th. It is this month.
It's the 18th.
Yeah, the 18th, where we will hopefully finalize the scenario. I think we also have a meeting held if we need a third one, Angela, is that right?
Yes, the following Thursday.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So if need be, we would meet again on the 25th.
So would it make sense for homework for y'all to look at the options and choose your top scenario? Think about any tweaks or adjustments based on that scenario that you want to recommend. And come in with your ideas for the priorities for the expansion money if we have that.
And staff will provide in the interim the updated spreadsheet with these scenarios, as well as the previously funded projects from the last few years. And also happy to look at which of these projects would potentially be in their third year of funding if they were to receive an award this year.
And the updated spreadsheet, hopefully we'll give it to you in a way, we'll have to huddle as staff, that you can easily see for your top scenario, okay, what does that look like for focus areas? Or what does it look like for geography to test the portfolio balance without overwhelming you with data. And if you would like to look at the spreadsheet together at any point between now and 2 weeks from now, just contact any of the three of us and we can get together or jump on a call and filter it together.
I will say, I think that these conversations are, each year that I've been part of this process, the process has just been elevated more and more in terms of what this committee is able to look at and take into consideration. And it feels exciting to see that kind of movement. So I just wanted to say that.
And segue on that a little bit, just from what I've heard from the history and the evolution of the scoring process, the application process itself, like each year has been leaps and bounds. And this only being my second year, like, none of these scenarios even cross my mind. It's been exciting and it's good. And I don't want to get too far ahead of it for the bigger conversation once it's over. But I do think it's worth considering when we are thinking a scenario, is it going to be applicable to next year? Because thinking through this and having not thought about it before, if I knew what the scenarios might be, it might affect on what the scoring to be controlled or laid out. Or
I thought you were gonna say it might affect how you apply, how you craft your proposal if we were able to tell the top so many out of each category.
I think that's the other side of it too. I think that has to be spoken to as well. But it can also affect, how I'm scoring or how I want the applications to be presented to me as I'm scoring them. I can organize them. It's just worth considering whatever scenario we choose is going to work in the future. It might change the overall picture.
Well, I have an ideas for the future list that I've been listening to these suggestions and jotting them further.
There were some incredibly well-written grants. And then there was some that was like, bless your heart. And, I think as we consider new projects that we're going to have to do something about the quality of the grants that we get. Because you could have a new project, not know a lot about grant writing, and really just, shoot yourself in the foot, so to speak, with your poor grant writing skills. And so I don't know how we get around that, because that's gonna be just people hours, whether or not we do a grant writing workshop for that specific group. If you've never applied for a Buncombe County grant, come to this workshop, make it a part of the eligibility, from the workshop, kind of thing. But, I think those new projects are they're risky for themselves and they're risky for us to make sure that we get good stuff funded. Not just, good stuff funded. And sometimes the paper, doesn't really tell you the story.
We do end up putting a lot of energy toward those projects that get funded, so we can successfully get them through the contract, all the processes. And what you've shared makes me think about how we as staff work with those that didn't get funded and offer them continued resource and capacity.
I have a question unrelated to scoring. So I know I'm rotating off the committee this year, and several of us, others, so when do we rotate off? Like, what is the month of my meeting that
Terms end June 30, based on the fiscal year. So that can be the other thing that staff works on, is the list of committee member terms.
Yeah, it's just good to know, and it's good for staff to know that 3 people are rotating off.
Yeah.
You're gonna have
rotating
to
off.
fill 3 spots, so I guess you can't advertise the vacancy. Well, you probably could advertise the vacancies because.
Do you know that information off the top of your head, Angela? The committee member terms?
I do not, but I can check and see.
I think we're done looking at the scenarios for now, if you need to get your screen back.
So it's a 3-year term, then you can do another 3 years?
Eligible for?
Eligible for.
If you're
another 3 years.
I thought it was eligible for 1 additional year. That's what I remember. But I couldn't swear to it.
I think it's another full term.
I think it's another 4 too.
Oh, I look at the bylaws.
I thought it was 3 and 2.
Oh, could be.
Well, remember when they started this, they staggered the length of people's first terms, because they didn't want everybody to all leave at the same time. So that's got people.
The cycle
There
probably.
were some initial terms that weren't 3 years long.
That's confusing.
Yeah.
How many years?
I signed up for 3 initially and then extended for you, but something put in my mind that there was except for 1
It's
additional year. So I
complicated.
could be making that up, but that was
And then sometimes we fill vacancies and somebody fills up the rest of someone else's
Oh,
term.
really? Well, you guys just.
Yeah, mine was
figured it
February,
out.
ours, I think ours were in March last year.
How about we send you the list? Angela has maybe an update.
I've got it. So, Liz, it looks like you were originally appointed in 2020, and so you are halfway through your second term. Your second term in
So it is stretched
June
goals.
2026.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks like,
Okay, good.
yeah, it looks like we only have 1 committee member that is in their second term that ends this year, and that's Kim. And it looks like everybody else will stay on, because we do have some others that's current term is up this year, but they're in their first term, so they would be eligible to be reappointed.
No, Kim.
And we definitely have staggered terms, right?
Yes.
So do we still have so when new people are reappointed or appointed, do they have the choice of 1, 2, or 3 years, or is it automatically a certain term?
It's an automatic 3-year term,
Okay.
unless you're filling a vacancy that was partially. So it's not.
I'm glad you're keeping track of all this stuff because it sounds really complicated.
Yeah, it's written down somewhere, but obviously not in our minds.
Yeah.
Anything else y'all need from staff in order to feel like you can confidently make some funding recommendations?
It felt easier last year.
It did feel, I feel like our first scoring kind of had an even distribution in a way that we didn't see this year.
What do you mean, in what
I
way?
mean, I think we had more grants we could give, and then we also had better distribution in the categories.
And then have as
Yeah.
many people asking for.
Big numbers, yeah.
So scenario, and that was based on scenario number 1 for last year.
Yeah,
Pretty much just.
so we had more
Right.
grants to give out, and it covered the categories a little more.
And did everybody like that? So maybe we could look at scenario 1 and then just add on for what it doesn't have this year. I mean, I guess that's what we're doing.
So we'll ask you for your favorite scenario of the choices provided, or any additional scenarios you have to provide.
I'll think about that. How about a lottery? How about we just put everybody's name in a big box?
So that's a question, if someone in the committee comes up with an alternative scenario, can we send it and have that put in a spreadsheet?
Yep.
Like that scenario 8.
You can go as,
So we send the ideas to Angela and then she'll do the work. And she smiles at her.
Only while we're watching her do it.
I've had that pressure.
We'll send you some takeout food.
well, staff pretty much carried this on through, but I guess back to you, Chair.
I really appreciate all of the discussion, because there are so many variables to take into account that we didn't necessarily talk over last year, but it is an evolution here to try to do the best job we can. So I really appreciate speaking up and bringing the meeting to a close. Thank you. Have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye, Kim, bye, Angela.
Betsy. Bye.
Everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.